the work that we do helps us increase the biodiversity of the area in general. The Ozarks here have incredible natural communities and biodiversity through the roof. Many of these hilltops were kind of islands back when this was all an inland sea. So we get these weirdo species hanging on. And because we do the management that we do, it encourages that biodiversity, which helps us combat even climate change. Biodiversity is resiliency. And so having resilient habitats is really important for us and the rest of our community.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Curious by Nature with Deep Roots. I'm your host, Sydney Ross, and we have a great show for you today as we continue our summer vacation through the Ozarks. Today, we're going to learn more about pine forests that used to cover much of the Ozark region, with some side quests to check out Dolomite glades and the neat native plants that call their shallow, rocky soils home. Before we get started, I would like to make a few announcements. First, I'd like to thank the Missouri Department of Conservation for their support of Curious by Nature and for the work that they do to protect fish, forest, and wildlife resources across the state of Missouri. I'd also like to thank our viewers and donors like you for making programs like this possible. If you're watching the recording on YouTube or listening to the podcast, please be sure to comment, like, and subscribe to our show so more nature nerds like yourself can find us. And if you're able, consider making a donation. Our next episode is called Fungus Fueled Prairie Health, not Funky Fueled Prairie Health, as you may have seen in our commercials. And this awesome episode is going to air on Thursday, August 6th at 12 p.m. Central. And y'all, if you love prairies, if you love mushrooms, if you love soil health, this one is for you because the key to more successful prairie restorations could be hidden right beneath our feet as we explore the fascinating world of native arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi with Dr. Liz Kozel of the University of Kansas. Her research focuses on how restoring AMF, arbuscular mycorrhizae fungi, say that 10 times fast, how her research focuses on how this AMF improves floristic quality, increases native plant diversity, and helps suppress weeds in new prairies. We'll dig into the role of soil microbial communities, discuss practical approaches for reintroducing native AMF, and review the first 2 years of results from experimental prairie plots on Johnson County Parks and Recreation District parklands. You won't want to miss it, and I hope you'll tune in. Okay, folks, these photos here on your screen are examples of stuff we did out in the gardens yesterday at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center here in Kansas City. 5 times a month, Deep Roots hosts Discover Native Gardening, where new gardeners and advanced gardeners go into the landscape and learn seasonal skills and help beautify the space. So on the top left, you can see a before photo of Sycamore Station, and the bottom left, an after photo of all the works we did to edit out some really cool native plants, but ones that are a little too gregarious for that site, like that wingstem crownbeard, which you see that very cool native wasp is hanging out on. Y'all, this type of wasp has that long ovipositor, which it then uses to drill into wood, living trees to lay its eggs. So cool. You get to see things like this and have camaraderie in the landscape when you join us for our free gardening workshops. So be sure to check it out. Discover Native Gardening with Deep Roots, 5 times a month, March through October at the Anita B. Gorman Conservation Discovery Center. Be sure to join us sometime soon. Do you or someone you know have a native garden in Kansas City? Well, we want to show it off at a future habitat garden tour. On these tours, we show native gardens that vary in size, style, and goals. And we want to inspire more native plantings by demonstrating to new gardeners how these plants fit into residential spaces. So share some native plant love in your neighborhood by nominating a native garden today. Visit the Habitat Garden Tour page on the Deep Roots website to learn more, or email your nomination to hello@deeprootskc.org with the subject line Native Garden Nomination. We want to see your gardens, folks, so please consider joining us. As always, Curious by Nature is recorded and all resources will be sent live or sent to our live attendees following the show. Don't forget, let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from. I love seeing folks telling us where they're at from, like Greendale, Missouri, Cole Camp, Missouri, Lawrence, Kansas, Raytown. Let us know in the chat where you're tuning in from and what cool stuff you're seeing in your landscapes. I want to know blooms. I want to know bugs. I want to know birds. We want to know it all. So be sure to chime in there. And if you have questions for our guest experts today, put that information in the Q&A section. Because at the end of our show today, we always do a live pop quiz. Our crowd is smart and they always get the answers right. And one lucky winner today will receive a copy of Dr. Doug Tallamy's Nature's Best Hope. Now, a lot of our audience members are avid native gardeners, so you may already have this book, but maybe your neighbor who you want to encourage to plant native doesn't. So be sure to tune in and submit your answer to our pop quiz later in the episode today so you can win this book and some Deep Roots swag. It's always a fun time here with us at Curious by Nature. Okay, without further ado, let's bring out today's guest experts and welcome Neal Humke and Sophie Krotman to the virtual stage. Neal serves as Fire and Stewardship Manager with the LAD Foundation and has worked in the Ozarks for the past 20 years. He developed the foundation's prescribed fire program and coordinates glade and woodland restoration efforts as part of the ecology team. Neal serves as a charter member of the Missouri Prescribed Fire Council and was awarded the Grow Native 2023 Native Plant Protector Award. Well earned, Neal. In his free time, he enjoys gardening with native plants, exploring the Ozarks, and from what I hear, looking at bugs, which is pretty cool. And then Sophie Krotman began with the LAD Foundation in November of 2024 as the Recreation and Outreach Coordinator. Her position allows for flexibility to work closely with the ecology and forestry teams, as well as convey the work of the foundation and pioneer forest through events and presentations. Prior to her work with LAD, Sophie was a national park ranger at multiple sites and stewardship technician with Missouri State Parks. She's done it all, folks. And she is originally from Hillsboro, Missouri, where she was raised on an organic vegetable farm and developed a passion for sustainability and conservation. She loves reading, gardening, and bone-making jewelry, and of course, her dog, Knox. Welcome, Neal and Sophie. It's so great to see you again.
Great to see you too, Sydney.
Great to be here.
Yes. Okay. So just a little background, y'all. I got to visit the Ozarks last year, about a year ago, almost to the day, and hang out with Sophie and Neal and my buddy Taylor Neff of the Missouri Department of Conservation. And we got to go walk through the woods and check out glades and spend a ton of awesome time with these folks. But we're back. We're reminiscing, and we've got a great show to prove to you all. The proof is in the pudding, as they say, so you'll see that here soon. But before we get started, Sophie and Neal, I'm just curious, what are some cool projects y'all are working on with the LAD Foundation right now?
For us on the ecology team, this is a season of monitoring. So we do floristic monitoring just to track our changes in the use of our land management tools like fire and timber thinning and commercial harvest. So we want to track the biological response to what we do. And so reading permanent long-term vegetation plots and is one of our core tasks this time of year.
Nice. And Sophie, I know you're on the like public outreach and program side of things. You got anything cool going on that you're excited about?
Yeah, I actually just got to do a constellation tour in partnership with Echo Bluff State Park. So to talk about dark skies conservation, which was super duper fun. I'll be doing that again in September. Come on out to Echo Bluff. I think it's on the 12th. And we're also, keeping up with doing some trail work and helping out the ecology team. So always busy.
Always something to do out there, right?
Always.
Yeah. All right, folks. Well, I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. We're going to be exploring pine forests and Dolomite glades in the Ozarks, so enjoy.
My name is Neal Humke. I'm the fire management program coordinator here with the LAD Foundation and Pioneer Forest. We are the largest private landowner in Missouri, located based out of Salem, but our land holdings are primarily in the Current River, Jacks Fork, and 11 Point watersheds here. We're near Round Spring today on a muggy but pretty typical summer Missouri hot day. So, but we got up early and enjoying the early weather here. So Leo Dry founded the LAD Foundation and owns Pioneer Forest throughout most of his life. And his whole goal with the foundation and the forest was to protect the watershed, but also to keep economies functioning, to keep locals employed, harvest trees sustainably through a single tree selection harvest, which was not that common at the time. He searched the worldwide and brought experts in. He was not trained as a forester, but he had lots of foresters as expertise and kind of self-taught himself to do a more sustainable way of harvest and production and sustainability here in the Ozarks. But again, he is an equally important concept in his mind was to protect the watershed and the environment. He didn't care just about trees and just about people. He also liked natural areas, which is what I do. I manage natural areas here. We're on a glade. We manage woodlands and glades and fens and everything unique that we have here. As a fire manager, I'll have to start from that angle. Like most of the Ozarks had a lot of regular, but not that intense fire, and it was anthropogenic fire. Like fire was intentionally used here to manage the communities. And so the woods that we have today are often, at least the unburned woods, are oftentimes overstocked in terms of the natural community that it should be, which are mostly woodlands here. We do have some forest types, but generally there's a lot of woodland habitat in the Ozarks. And historically that was maintained with fire. That structure of a canopy of trees, but an open understory, which we'll see later today in the pine woodland, was very much fire maintained, as was this glade. The glade's a little bit more intuitive that it needs fire. It's grassland-like, prairie-like. It needs routine fire as well. We're situated here in the Ozarks next to the Great Plains, so a lot of dry plains fires probably came into, if you picture a landscape of continuous fuels and natural areas prior to settlement, fires would have crept and crossed landscapes pretty readily. So my take on it is like fire was always here, but humans just kind of took the torch and used it as a tool, and that's why we have these such diverse communities here too. The maintenance of them through fire and just natural drought systems and just the ecology that we have. So some good indicators of glades. First off, if it's an intact, like, or restored glade like we see here, it has a lot of tallgrass prairie-like species, a lot of the same species, big blue stem, butterfly weed, the very same species that we see in tallgrass prairie. The main thing that makes a glade versus a prairie is that part of it's regional, but the big thing is that the bedrock is at the surface here. So depending on the type of bedrock, here we're on Dolomite, but we also have rhyolite glades, and in other parts of the state, a whole myriad of other rock-based types of glades. On the forestry side, we have what's called a continuous forest inventory. I won't speak much to that, but that's long-term, more than half a century now. We have data on individual trees that have grown through time, and that's how we track our forestry, forest health and things at scale, at 150,000 acres. But more specifically on our natural areas like this, we do baseline monitoring prior to management, and that gives us just a baseline record of what species are here and how prevalent they are, how much coverage any given plant has, and then we'll resample that through time after management. So this site has been cleared of cedars for 6 years and has had fire for 10 years, so it's in the restoration phase. Of course, monitoring takes time, so we never have enough of it, but we try to get enough that we can get a representative sample. So we have some plots in glades like this and plots in woodlands and Now, I will say we're also starting to do bird research using audio recorders um, and other things like bee surveys and just kind of trying to learn as much as we can. So you'll probably notice the brush component here. And this site has not been burned in 3 years, so the brush is pretty prevalent. And a lot of it's either small trees or certainly native brush, whether it's sumac. Um, as a manager, you can think of that as two different ways. Like on the one hand, we want more of a prairie-like vegetation here. And again, it's still in the restoration phase, but on the other hand, the brush is great habitat for birds. So things like prairie warblers love this habitat, open glade, but also brushy habitat to nest in. And we find a lot of them here. I don't happen to hear one yet today, but we might. And that carries over to woodlands too. So our woodlands also are in the restoration phase, but they would always have a woodland, or a brush component as well, and that's just part of the natural system. And again, we're fire occasionally on a 2 to 3 year or so cycle, maybe 5 years, just kind of keeps that brush at bay and it kind of keeps the understory openness there.
My name is Sophie Krautman. I am the Recreation and Outreach Coordinator with the LAD Foundation. So most of what I do is trying to maintain and working to restore some of our recreation opportunities with our many trails, including a couple sections of the Ozark Trail that run through our holdings here in the Roger Pryor Pioneer Backcountry. But I also work with our outreach side of things. So we're developing more of a program, but I get to go on fun kind of field trips for myself and go work with other organizations to spread the word about what we do. I love that. So today, at the moment, we're in a beautiful glade here near Round Spring, and one of my favorite plants that's out here is this butterfly milkweed. We actually have a cute little bee. We have a bee study going on right now. So our butterfly milkweed it's this beautiful, vibrant, bright orange. It is a member of the milkweed family, of course, Asclepius, and it's really important for many of our pollinators. You'll see it on roadsides sometimes. I've been really thrilled with this season about how much that I've seen, but we've got several species here, so it's important to our bee friends. It's also important to various butterfly species, which there's one right over there hanging out on our milkweed. Also have our mint here. This is a calla mint that smells absolutely incredible. When you're walking through the glade, you can certainly smell it, and it's always a good way to kind of know you're entering into a glade when you get that mint smell. It's often found at the edges.
This glade's about 20 acres.
Wow.
And you wouldn't really guess that because there's a lot of trees here, but trees are supposed to be on a glade. Like there's a lot of chinkapin oaks, shumard oaks. They're very much part of this glade. And we took our time when we restored this. And prior to restoration, if you picture a pretty dense component of eastern red cedars in here as well, you'll see some of the skeletons left on the ground or standing of what we cut. But we spent a lot of time up front felling and limbing down those limbs and then burning those in the dead of winter to try to maintain these chinkapin oaks and not scar them and top kill them. They're very much character tree and part of the system. So the short vegetation on glades, it's two main components. One is just the species that are here, this tallgrass prairie species. Which tend to be, it's open sunlight, so they don't have to grow tall, like the sun's coming down to them. But it's also because of the rock outcrop, and that tends to make it dry, at least some part of the year. It's really hot and dry here, and that limits growth, honestly. Like, we've had a lot of rain this spring, so things are pretty lush right now, but as you can imagine, late summer, things get hot and dry. And one adaptation is just to stay small and wilt and come back next year. The glade communities themselves are the rarity here. Like, and beyond that, just to have a well managed glade is kind of important as well. A lot of what we inherited are damaged glades through open range grazing or just lack of fire, and have had these cedars come in. So oftentimes the rare plants are just the entire community here, like the glade itself, but there can be rare individual species as well within a glade. whether it's a forb or a tree. So we're at what is called the virgin pine area. This is a virgin in the sense that it was never logged. There's a mile-long strip along U.S. Highway 19 here in northern Shannon County near Round Spring. It's a mile-long strip that was saved from logging, and so it's got old-growth pine on it. And the only native pine to Missouri is Shortleaf Pine, and that's what these are, Pinus echinata. This stand was intact during the creation of Highway 19, when Highway 19 was first laid out. And that was also towards the end of industrial pine logging in Missouri. So there wasn't a whole lot of pine left, especially the big old pines. So the state transportation department at the time decided to save this mile-long strip of old-growth trees for its scenic value. And it wasn't until much later that the LAD Foundation acquired that land, since we own land beyond the highway. And we have foresters and ecologists that manage these areas, that the Missouri Department of Transportation transferred that land to us. So it was actively and consciously saved. There has been tree ring dendrochronologic work here by Dr. Richard Guyette, and he determined that the average pith date was 1770 on these things. So
oh my gosh,
they're approaching 300 years old now. So
that's amazing.
So dendrochronology is the study of tree rings, and some very basic things that you can determine from that is just tree age. But even from certainly from a live tree, you can date it back from present time, right? But even on dead wood, though, that the experts, that folks like the Center for Tree Ring Science at MU can based on climate change, which relates to tree ring growth, they can backdate any series of tree rings to the climate that it grew in, and in essence date it. So even if it was long dead, it can be dated back. And but we also find fire scars in tree rings. This is probably an old lightning scar that has also had fire scars. There are essentially two main methods to sample tree rings. If you have something that you can get a complete cross section of the tree, or a section, you can study that. Now, obviously, we're not wanting to cut these trees down. We want them to live their life fully, and so tree cores, which is basically it takes a small core sample of the tree. That's how Dr. Richard Guyette sampled a representative sample of these trees, and his tags are still on some of these trees. Pine is resinous, especially when it's damaged. It puts out a lot of resin, so that helps to cure the wood and make it both flammable, but also preserves it. So the fact that it has resin both creates and helps maintain some of those scars that would happen either from lightning or fire through time. So we have maintained and created a plant species list for this larger, now 1,000-acre woodland fire managed site, which contains mostly pine and oak woodlands, but it also has some glades. So far, I think our total plant list is above 560. And that includes some exotic invasives too, which tend to come in on the highway and things like that. But a lot of good biodiversity here. A lot of it's really intact. It was just not managed for natural communities. And so once we started doing that, they popped out of the shade from their rootstock and came back primarily. We've not planted anything. It's all here. It's just a matter of managing it correctly and hopefully diligently, so things can further restore themselves here. The tree composition varies a lot, and that's based on history. So here in the virgin pine corridor, we still have a lot of intact pine canopy, much of which is old growth, but some is younger and kind of a second growth coming in as well. Beyond the virgin pine corridor, where the places that have been cut, So there's a varied densities of oaks and pines based on aspect too. We have a lot of rich topography here, being next to the current river. There's a lot of deep ravines. There's several 100-foot elevation change from valley to ridge. So if you have a north slope, in current day they tend to harbor more oaks and more mesic species, whereas the south slopes and west slopes are drier, places where pine can persist better, at least now during um, prior to active management. When I walk through the woods of typical unmanaged Ozarks, I find a lot of these woodland plants that they're just not blooming. Like they're hanging on in the shade, um, which is good in one sense. They're still here on the landscape. We have that biological diversity here, and all we need to do is manage it correctly. And so we're not planting anything. It's all here. Now, why to do that? So, um, an actively managed woodland and glade, they had the native flora is blooming, and that drives full ecologies of insects and birds, and essentially you can think of this as the full expression of the ecology of the Ozarks. Now, again, there's trade-offs with that, with fire and management for ecology too. But yeah, we're managing for as full of ecosystem as we can here. Most of the Midwest and certainly the Ozarks were actively managed by Native Americans with fire. And because of that, our plants and plant communities have evolved with fire too. Just the sense that this understory is open is now caused by fire. We've burned this unit, I believe, 6 times in the past 11 years. So on more or less a 2-year cycle. That's why the understory is open. And even dialing into the forbs on the ground, like if we don't actively burn here, oftentimes they don't flower well, and don't reseed, and just the maintenance of the species and the communities are really driven by fire.
There are some holes at the top. I don't know who's living in them, but it's a softer wood. We don't have pine brown-headed nuthatches currently, we think, but we would like them to come back and establish a population here. So one of the projects that our seasonal crew and our ecology team was involved in over the winter was actually standing up some of our dead snags, because those nuthatches need the dead snags to nest in. And so we really like seeing that. We have a few others in the stand, and we are hopeful that we will get a good population here. All of our birders are very excited, and so are we.
Here's a quick note on how you can engage in community science.
There's a couple of different apps that you can get that are really user-friendly. Seek is one of them, and it's tied with another one, iNaturalist, and both of them are community-based, and it essentially allows you to identify, usually pretty accurately, with Seek, what plant it is that you're looking at, but it also applies to animals. It'll even ID your friends as Homo sapiens. I tried it. But Seek is really great because it's a great way for you to go out and figure out what it is that you're looking at, and you can learn a little bit more about it. It has an option that's like view species, and it tells you about it as long as you have service, though I find it works best in airplane mode in a lot of the places I find myself. And you can tie that in with iNaturalist, which is a much more community-based science app, in the sense that you post and then other people can help you identify what it is, and then researchers, scientists, or just individuals can go on and use that data to figure out a little bit more about the environment in which they are. I've got a good buddy of mine who lives over in the Houston area who takes a picture and posts to iNaturalist of every box turtle he finds, so that sometime when somebody decides to do box turtle research, there's data available. So I really enjoy using it. I like to, get my Seek points, and there are challenges associated with it too, which is a really fun way to, kind of say like, all right, I'm going to go look at beetles and learn a little bit more about beetles in your environment.
And that's our show. But stick around. The live Q&A is coming up next with the LAD Foundation. Okay, Neal and Sophie, I'm going to welcome you back to the virtual stage, and we're going to jump into our Q&A. How was it reliving a wonderful summertime in the woods with y'all?
It was good, a lot like it is this summer.
Lots of gnats still
I
out
know.
there.
I was like, should I have given folks a trigger warning? Because there's like so many flying bugs in our face. I was like, oh yeah, I remember that actually. Oh, wonderful. Well, okay. So I've got some questions here for you, but folks in our audience, if you have questions for Neal and Sophie, be sure to put them in the Q&A section and we'll go ahead and jump in. Okay. So, can you tell us a recent success story or maybe a challenge that you all have recently faced in managing the various areas that you steward with the LAD Foundation?
That's a good question. There's so many to draw from. We the larger conservation community down here have been managing tall larkspur for um, the past several decades. So I guess it's not really that recent, but it's a plant that is regionally rare. It's found here in a couple of counties in the Ozarks of Missouri, three counties, I think, and then it's also found in Tennessee. So like it's got a disjunct population, and they're genetically similar. But they're the same species. And until we started managing the woodlands, and in particular glades and the lower edges of glades where tall larkspur thrives, it didn't fully express itself. Like I said in the video, it hung on in the shade and didn't flower. So thinning the woods, thinning those glades, and adding regular prescribed fire really benefited that plant to the point where it's become less tracked at the state level because we've done such good management.
Interesting. Okay. And so I attended the Grassland Restoration Network workshop up at Shaw Nature Reserve earlier this year, and they had some delphinium species. And remind me, because I don't work with delphiniums very often, that is a larkspur, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
wonderful. I was
Yep.
like just checking. But I thought it was really interesting because the delphiniums I saw there were like blue. Like and then the ones that I've seen in our prairies here in Kansas City or even across state lines are white. Do you notice like any visual characteristic differences in that research that you were describing?
So there are several species of delphiniums native to Missouri. I don't know how many offhand, but even just right here in the Ozarks, we have a half a dozen or so, I think. The tall larkspur, it is the tallest one in Missouri, at least. It can grow, it normally grows 4 to 5 feet tall and can be 6, 7 feet tall, whereas most delphiniums are more like knee height, so. Tall larkspur is a deep, rich blue or purple typically, but all delphiniums can vary a bit in flower color. So
Interesting. Well, she sounds like a tall drink of water. I've never
yeah.
met a delphinium that tall, but that's very cool.
Come
And
visit.
I know I need to come back down. I've got some dates on my calendar that I'll email you guys about later, but I'm excited. Okay, so I know obviously with restoration efforts, it's important to have cross collaborations between departments, and because we have different types of specialists that work in conservation, right? Can you talk about any community science or maybe research partnerships that are underway with some of the areas you're taking care of?
Well, I will say just right from the start that all of the public land management agencies, one of which we're privately owned, but we consider ourselves a conservation scale landowner. So we partner with the National Park Service, MDC, the Missouri Department of Conservation, Missouri State Parks. All of us do monitoring of similar types, and any given project, someone will have a project and just reach out across boundaries, across agencies for help. So whether that's implementing fire, like actually getting on the fire line to help each other, or whether it's through monitoring what's out there, or other reasons, even planning.
Interesting. And before we hopped on live, you mentioned something about herps. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, about some of that research?
Yes, so our current chief ecologist, Dana Morris, is a PhD ornithologist. So she brings her expertise to this job, which is great to have. And so she's been trying to monitor more than just the traditional plants, but go out and monitor birds. And amphibians and reptiles too, and bees and things like that. So we have a summer intern that's taking the lead on monitoring some of our wetlands, and here in the Ozarks, that tends to be things like wet sinkhole ponds.
Ooh.
That's a main one. We also have fens and creeks and things, but so they're actually going out late tonight to listen for frogs, just to get a good inventory of what we have and where.
That's so cool. I love that. Okay, so then, Sophie, this I think maybe this will be a good question for you. How do you balance public use of these sites and ecosystem protection?
It's a challenge. It is, we have such cool ecosystems, and we do welcome minimum impact, leave no trace style recreation within all of our lands. You don't have to stick to a trail, though even within our backcountry, we have, 73 miles of trail that you are welcome to walk on. We also have an equestrian trail. So we have a lot of different user groups that want to come out and use the land to enjoy themselves, to recreate, and that's welcome. But again, the emphasis has to be on that minimum impact, and you are more than welcome to go find a fen, go explore and see what frogs you can catch if that's your passion. We just ask that you leave it as or better than you found it. And a lot of what that comes down to and what I've been working on right now is developing our long-term recreation plan and kind of a communication strategies with those user groups specifically to kind of develop some of that community and shared responsibility.
Mm. I mean, that is such a tricky balance to strike, right? Because it's like we want people to come out and explore these areas, but we want to make sure we are not causing more harm than good when we
Right.
do visit and build these connections, these emotional connections and intellectual connections with our landscape. So I admire the work that you do there. Okay, we've got some questions from our audience. Here is a question from Val. What are your primary invasive species, and do you ever and she says, do you ever try to eliminate them, or maybe what are some of the approaches to eliminate the invasive species you may come across?
We do have invasive species. It wasn't that long ago where those are seem fairly remote, at least in terms of being away from interstates and urban development and things, which is it tends to be how we get invaders come in through highways and traffic and things. But we're not immune to exotic invasives. They're here and they're coming. So we have woody invaders that come into our forests and woodlands, things like bush honeysuckle and autumn olive and tree of heaven,
Yeah.
to name just a few. But and then our more open areas like glades and like roadsides tend to get the things that like sun. So things like Sericea lespedeza is pretty common along roadsides now, um, and other just herbaceous invaders. A couple of key strategy. We just try to reduce the disturbance. That really helps keep the invaders out. Most invasive species like that disturbance, so that's one strategy. But we do actively treat and try to manage invasives from having a negative impact.
Oof. Yeah, and our viewers are all very, very familiar, probably with their own invasive species in their backyards. And if folks, if you're not, we've got really great resources for the state of Missouri, the Missouri Invasive Plant Council, which I'll include a link in our show notes today, that can help you identify and address how to manage those invasive species, regardless of your footprint. But yeah, with the virgin pine area that we saw today, with that highway right along it, that doesn't surprise me that a lot of invasive species are spreading off of the tires of cars, which, I hadn't even thought about that concept until I came down to the Ozarks and met with Angela Sokolowski, the invasive species coordinator for Missouri Department of Conservation. I'm like, oh, duh. That's unfortunately a great way to spread invasive species without even realizing it.
Well, and we also actively manage our land. So, like through commercial timber harvest, that's a big core of what we do. But we also have such a big land holding, and In places, it's not a contiguous block of land. We can't just fence it off and have a key and lock it up. We have a lot of public roads, county roads, state roads that cross our land, and so there's public access, and we need access just for our functionality too.
Yeah, no doubt. So you mentioned timber harvest. So there's a lot of misconceptions out there about timber harvest, though I think our audience is pretty knowledgeable and understanding of the benefits. But how do you communicate the value, or what is the value of having active management, and how do you communicate this to visitors?
That's a good question. I mean, it funds what we do, honestly. Like, we get good income from timber revenue, and that's been our tradition here. You know, it's a vital thing on the landscape, and if done well, it's kind of a surrogate for full ecological management. It's maintaining those woodlands, and it's allowing at least intermittent sun on the ground. When we harvest a tree, that's a gap in the forest that much of which was a natural community of a woodland. So having that sun on the ground helps keep those remnant herbaceous plants alive and well on the landscape. But in the absence of fire, which we don't use fire on the majority of our lands. So harvest and commercial harvest is at least a surrogate for that.
And why don't you use more prescribed fire?
Um, so first and foremost, it's not needed for high quality timber products, and it can be detrimental. It can scar the timber. And the other side too is fire takes resources, and we have a lot of land, so we're focusing on we're most beneficial with fire.
That all checks out. Makes sense to me. So speaking of your other lands, well, actually, let me back up. What does LAD stand for with the LAD Foundation?
LAD is actually the initials of our founder. It's Leo A. Dry. So he purchased all of the land, and he had it as a private operating foundation as Pioneer Forest, and then he and Kay, his wife, created the LAD Foundation and eventually donated Pioneer Forest to the foundation.
Wow, that's amazing. I really enjoyed seeing the historical photos. Thank you, by the way, Sophie, for
Yeah, you're
sharing,
welcome.
and thank you, LED Foundation, for supplying those. Which, by the way, folks, I'll have copies of those images in the resources too that I'll send out to y'all. It's very cool to see the historic images of these areas. But so the Pioneer Forest isn't the only area the LED Foundation stewards. So, can you talk a little bit about the other landscapes beyond that area that you guys take care of?
We do own several state natural areas, both on Pioneer Forest, but also separately from Pioneer Forest. So sites like Hickory Canyons, and others we have a whole suite of LAD owned lands that we have other agencies manage for us, whether it's the Missouri Department of Conservation or Missouri State Parks. So those are the two main ones that manage those lands that are, I guess, kind of satellite lands to our core lands, which are Pioneer Forest.
Yeah, we have land holdings in 13 counties in the state of Missouri. Most of it is within kind of the six counties surrounding Shannon County, Reynolds, Carter, Dent, that kind of area. But we actually have some all the way up in Monroe County, Rocky Creek Conservation Area. The two state park sites that we own are Dillard Mill State Historic Site and Grand Gulf State Park, way down south. So we're a little all over the place, but our ability to partner with the state organizations is really what allows us to continue the conservation work. So much of conservation in general could not be done without partnerships and kind of that community that has been developed.
No doubt. I'm such a nerd. I just got goosebumps thinking about just like collaboration across the board. I mean, it's what makes conservation happen. It's the only way is if we come together and work together and join our forces and abilities and skill sets. So. Okay, we've got a few more questions from our audience, but I think we're going to pause real quick and do our pop quiz. So, for folks who've never done the pop quiz on Curious by Nature, what I want you to do is access the webinar chat. So, find that. It's not the Q&A. Find the webinar chat And then I want you to select that blue box and click everyone because I want everyone to see everyone's answers. And the first person to answer this question correctly will receive a copy of Dr. Doug Tallamy's Nature's Best Hope, which is a fantastic read. It's very inspiring. If you haven't read it, or if you have already read it, maybe you'll win it and share it with someone that you want to inspire to plant native. You'll also get some fun swag like some deep root stickers and this "You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone" bumper sticker by Kansas City artist Andy Ozier. Okay, so without further ado, here's the question. I'm also going to put it into the chat. What is the only native species of pine tree found in Missouri? Were you paying attention? The whole episode is about this. Okay. Okay. We can never stump you guys. This may have been low-hanging fruit, but I thought it was a really interesting thing because people, at least up here in Kansas City and probably elsewhere, they're like, I want a pine tree. And I'm like, oh, I have to tell you, pines don't really love living this far north of Missouri. But anyway, that's a whole other story. So I'm going to say Kelsey Helms. You got the answer correct, which is shortleaf pine. That is the correct answer. So, Kelsey, once you receive an email from me with the resources following today's program, please respond to me with your mailing address and I will send that out to you. And congratulations. And thanks for playing, everybody. You're all so smart. Okay, wonderful. So let's dive into a few more questions before we wrap up today's episode. Carolyn says, you mentioned that you typically burn the areas every 3 or so years. Do you have pretty good success with the prescribed burns in your forested areas? And you can.
So yeah, we do tend to focus our burning in the woods for woodland natural communities. So I mean the terms forest and woodland are kind of intermixed, but in terms of natural communities, we do have separate and distinct forest communities in Missouri and woodland communities, which are different. The woodland being a much more open understory and more fire maintained. So we do focus those areas, and we have had success. So I consider there to be like a restoration phase, which can take 15, 20 years. And that takes a little bit more frequent fire. So on more like the 2 to 3 year fire return interval. That just helps kind of help get the structure of the woodland back in place. Helps knock down the woody resprouts and things, and helps the herbaceous vegetation return. And then once that restoration phase is where we want it, and it's not always a time frame. We have to wait until it has the structure that we want. But then we can start to back off and maintain that natural community with maybe a little bit less frequent 4 or 5 year fire return interval. Yeah.
That's a good distinction between those different habitat types too. Because yeah, we don't actually have a lot of forests. And they require different management practices, as you pointed out. So
Yeah.
okay, question from Val. How long on average do shortleaf pines live?
Mhm. I believe they can live 300 to 500 years long, but a lot of it is based on economics. So if someone owns that land and needs or wants to harvest them, they can't, they grow fairly quickly. They're not the fastest growing pine, um, but they're also not our top economic tree in the forest either. So they have a lot of beneficial aspects that are not economic return on a pine log is not the as high as say an oak or it's something that's more valuable. So there's a lot of aesthetic value and things to use it based on the landowner's goals and priorities for management.
It all comes down to goals, folks. People hear me
Exactly.
talk about that all the time. Whether it's a large landscape or a small urban garden, your goals are going to determine your maintenance practices. Full stop. So, okay, I've got just a couple more questions for you guys. Jennifer says, when you talk about disturbance with invasives, do you mean changes in the land like adding gardens or clearing a spot for small additional structures? What about having areas mowed? She says she just used goats to clear some of her property. Will that possibly invite more invasives?
Well, I will just start by saying some of our typical disturbances on the land are just things like vehicles. So we need logging equipment to do our work. So that is a disturbance. We use traditional skidders and things to get logs out of the woods, and they create ruts and need roads and things. So that is a disturbance. But we also have public access to which, thanks to Sophie, we're trying to keep private vehicles where they're supposed to be, but we own so much land, it's a challenge. But we still have good partnerships with law enforcement from other agencies and things too. So, but just minimizing disturbance that we don't need, just I guess just trying to find an acceptable balance there.
And I
Yeah.
think in addition to that, the some of the disturbance that I see that I've noticed that causes the most likely for there to be invasives is when you actually disturb the soil itself. Earth doesn't like to be naked. There should always be something on top of that soil. And so if you've got a spot of a pile of dirt, or an open spot, that's likely where you're going to get new things sprouting. And those are going to be those pioneering species. Many of them could be invasive. When back on my farm, we had goats for a little while to do some of that landscape clearing. And some of it was to clear some invasive species. We had a lot of bush honeysuckle, and the goats will do a number on it and they can do really great work. But those pointy little hooves can create some ruts in the soil of their own. So just watch the areas where you have open soil. And if you can cover that with, a straw mulch, straw, not hay, that way you're not bringing in those seeds with it, that can help mitigate some of that seed generation.
Really good advice there, y'all. That's fantastic. Okay, and to wrap things up, this is a question for each of you. What do you wish more people understood about the work that you do?
Gosh.
I know it's a heavy question. You
Deep,
can take
Nika.
How much time do you have?
about 5 minutes. So
Yeah. I would say based on what I do with recreation and outreach specifically, recreation is wonderful. It can be social, it can be personal, it can be community based, and it's really important for all of those things. Play is very important for humans from birth to death. You have to play, and recreation is a great way to do that. But doing so in a way that is respectful of the landscape is, I think, the most important.
And I think for me, I really appreciate the balance that we have between economically managing our forest and also managing it for the ecology of the forest. So that on every given acre, there's a balance there, and when we're starting to integrate those two goals much more in recent times. So it's a challenge, and there's still going to be some areas that are more of a traditional single tree selection harvest area. And then there's other areas where we focus more as ecology driving the goals, but where we are trying to integrate those more. And it's challenged us as managers to work together and to monitor and just be aware of what we do out there.
Fantastic. Well, Sophie, Neal, I want to thank you again for joining us both last year and this year to share your passion and expertise and all the work that you do. So thank you so much. I hope to see you both later this year when I come back to visit. And yeah, so thank you for joining us. And our viewers, thank you for tuning in to today's Curious by Nature episode with Deep Roots. We hope you'll join us next time on August 6th when we look at fungus-fueled prairie restoration and how arbuscular mycorrhizae fungi heals the soil. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.